the synagogue leader murder trial and the jury that hasn't been able to reach a verdict. Michael Jackson-Bolanos is charged with the stabbing death of Samantha Wall. The judge told the jury that if they can't reach a verdict by the end of tomorrow, she'll be declaring a mistrial. Now, Jackson-Bolanos testified and told the jury that he's a thief, but not a killer.
That wasn't a lie. I don't know nothing about homicides. I didn't know nothing of what happened to that woman.
Well, you testified that you saw a woman outside and that you touched her body, right?
That's true.
So when the police asked you, did you see anyone out there, and you said, I didn't see anyone, that was a lie, right?
That was a lie for the purpose he stated that I went into her house. So that made me tell him, no, I did not go in nobody's house. I did not kill Mrs. Wall. I did not do none of that.
I want to welcome in a very special guest now, Michael Jackson-Bolanos' attorney, Brian Brown. Brian, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Could we start, please, on the jury being deadlocked? I mean, the deliberations have been going on for days here. Your thoughts on where they may be stuck, please?
I'm not 100% sure on when they're stuck. It's kind of surprising to me myself. I thought that they would come back rather quickly with a verdict, considering I believe that the prosecutor has not proved beyond a reasonable doubt that, in fact, my client is guilty. But in fact, that I felt that the evidence showed that my client was in fact innocent and that there was evidence that another individual perpetrated this particular crime. So as far as the jury, I'm not sure if they're hung up on certain elements or what. So it's kind of perplexing to me also.
I think that you've really built a lot of credibility with the jury in your theory and strategy that you've put forth. The strategy being that your client is a thief, that's what he does, that's what he was doing on this night, but not a killer. And that's something that you've been committed to, your client was committed to in the testimony. Talk a little bit about that, please. If anyone questions that and says, well, both could be true, he could be both a thief and a killer, what do you say in response to that, Brian?
I would say no. We were focused on just getting the truth out in the matter. The truth is, yes, he was out at that particular night and he was looking into cars. He didn't do any type of forced entry into any type of vehicles, didn't break into anybody's apartment. That's just not his MO as far as any type of violent crimes, least of all home invasion, and certainly not any type of assault or murder.
Brian, I've got a clip for you of Samantha Wall's ex-boyfriend, who we know has had a bit of a question mark over his head, let's say. Someone that police did look at and vet, but ultimately they decided not to charge him and they charged her client instead. Let's take a listen to some of what he said on the stand to the jury.
I was trying to figure out what had happened. I was trying to rationalize it in my head. That was, you know, there were all kinds of irrational thoughts going through my brain at that time, and I was trying to rationalize what was going on. I had no recollection of killing Sam. That I was thinking, I had convinced myself that I had done this act, but I could recall nothing of it.
So this guy confesses to killing her and then retracts it, takes it all back. Brian, I'm sure you have a lot to say about the ex-boyfriend. Talk to us here. What more maybe don't we know about this guy?
First of all, I believe that the law enforcement officers and agencies did not do a very thorough job of vetting the ex-boyfriend. There was a lot of testimony that was elicited through cross-examination and then subsequently asked of different officers in charge and other detectives in this particular case, which they did not know certain information, which was elicited, which was kind of perplexing to me as to why this information wasn't already asked of this particular individual, such as any type of clothing he may have been wearing on the day of this particular murder or the day after. He indicated that he went to a synagogue earlier that day. No video was extracted from that synagogue, nor is there known from the law enforcement officers if there's video even available there. Witnesses were not interviewed at the synagogue who can basically substantiate what the individual may have been wearing on that particular day. A question was solicited from the officer in charge. Had he known what type of clothing was worn by the ex-boyfriend, would that clothing may have been sought out and at the search warrant of the individual's house and then tested for further analysis, which he responded, yes, it would have been. But my questions are, why wasn't it done in the first place? And it was just a lot of other evidence that wasn't thoroughly analyzed or tested.
Sure. What about the knife that your client had on his person that night, Brian? Was any of the victim's blood found on that knife?
No, not at all. They did a very thorough analysis. They did a blood analysis. They did a DNA analysis. They also did a cut analysis where they sent the knife to an expert who compared the blade of the knife with the cuts that were in Samantha Wall's clothes to see whether or not that particular knife could have caused those cuts. There was also some fibers that were removed from the knife, and those were compared with the fibers from Samantha Wall's clothing. And of course, there was no comparison. And this later analysis, as far as the cut analysis and the fiber analysis, that was not done with the ex-boyfriend's knives that were retrieved from his vehicle and his residence.
I was going to ask you about that, Brian, because in all fairness to our viewers, we came into the trial a little bit late, so didn't get to see all of the evidence coming in. So the ex-boyfriend has knives as well. And do you mean that they weren't tested?
There was some testing that were done, but they did not do a thorough test as far as in comparison to my client. They did not collect fibers or potential hairs that were recovered from his knives, nor did they analyze those particular fibers and potential hairs that were recovered from those knives, nor did they do any type of analysis as far as the fibers to compare it with Samantha Wall's clothing fiber, nor did they do a cut analysis to see whether or not those knives could have caused the cuts that was found on Samantha Wall's clothing.
Wow. That's huge. I mean, Brian, as you know, one of the most favorable facts you have for you is that the victim's blood wasn't on the knife found on your client. That's huge. Perhaps one of the facts that is the most damaging, as you know, is some of her blood on his clothing. How have you explained that for the jury?
I believe that was explained through Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' testimony. He honestly testified that he was out at that particular night in that parking lot looking through cars, not looking into anybody's apartment. He was about to leave, and he came across her body, and he touched her to see if she was alive, checked her pulse, and the fact that she had so much blood saturated into her hair and to her garments, his arm obviously brushed against her clothing and or hair and got 2 spots of blood on the back of his sleeves that even officers themselves admitted they couldn't see with the naked eye, so it was unnoticeable, and it was such a very small trace amount. And that was the only blood that was found on him, which is on the back side of his sleeve, compared to all the blood that was inside of the apartment and the testimony from certain experts. I believe that whoever perpetrated this crime would have had copious amounts of blood on them, not just 2 specks on the back of their sleeve.
That's a really great argument, Brian. Before we let you go, on a much, much lighter note, we've got to ask, where is your client getting all of those great suits? Because many of our trial watchers have been watching him. And, you know, we always talk about how optics matter, as you know, Brian. You know, the way a defendant is dressed matters. And he is looking sharp. Tell me, do you have somebody working with your team, giving advice? Is his family helping him? What's going on?
Just the whole team together, me and my co-counsel together, and along with Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, just came together and made sure that he looked presentable and looked the part.
Yeah, well, you and your colleague are doing such a great job with that. He looks fantastic, and he did a fine job on the stand. We'll see if that mistrial comes, if there's no verdict tomorrow. Attorney Brian Brown, thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate you and hope to talk again sometime.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Of course, you as well. Take care. And still ahead here on opening statements, we've got a recap for you with the final pretrial motions hearing in the Black Swan murder trial in Florida. What could tip the scales of justice? Plus, in our next hour, we're bringing you some unaired portions of Scott Peterson's hearing on Tuesday. There is the convicted killer on his quest for a new trial.